Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm a virtual avatar in Developers Short. I hope you're all doing well and ready to learn. Before we get started, I just wanted to take a moment to invite you to become a member of the Great Devs. As a member of the Developers Short community, you'll have access to our job opportunities, activities, and future webinars. You can join us by responding to our invitation email or completing the form on our website. Also, a recording of this webinar will be on our LinkedIn page. Without further ado, let's dive into today's topic. Please give a warm welcome to our speaker.
A lot. That is domain-driven design. Yes. My goal for today is to go a little bit deeper on those concepts, especially to explain more the mindset around the usage of domain-driven design. Probably you have heard domain-driven design at least once, right? So it is super popular. It is a common concern about the software development world, about this domain-driven design. However, it is hard to see who are using properly domain-driven design. So my main goal for today is to go deep on domain-driven design and explain how to achieve success with Java. The first topic today is about why. Why should we care about domain-driven design nowadays? The main topic here is because technology becomes super strategic resource for everybody. So everything is around software. We could see the evolution of software development by Forbes in 2011, where they said every company is a software company, and then we moved to every company is a data company, and finally with the pandemic, we conclude that right now it is impossible to leave this world if without handle software. So every business, every single business is about software. So as you can see several super popular medias discussing about software. So it's not only about IT magazine discussing about software anymore. We are talking about business company discussing technology. So technology becomes super crucial, important for all and the whole humankind. However, we got that software is crucial. We're still facing the same mistake, right? So when talk about software development, we still fail in the same point. So that it is amazing article by Forbes that explain the 16 obstacles to a successful software project and how to avoid. I usually go to summarize those in only 4 categories or types, where we have a hyper-focused planning and design, unclear or undefined client expectation, unexpected complexity, and as a consequence, we have a poor collaboration between product and engineering team. And that's happened because we are doing a lot of planning, discussing, but okay, Otavio, if you're not delivering what the client wants, what we are doing instead? So we are doing complexity. To do an analogy between software development, let's imagine a restaurant, to be more precise, a pizzeria where we go together and then we order a pizza, we were waiting for 2-3 hours to receive finally a Caesar salad. So it is super failed and unhappy to wait for 3 hours to receive what we didn't order. Furthermore, we need to pay 1,000 euro to this kind of thing. So it is sad, it is unexpected, and worse, it is super expensive. So that is what happened with us today. So we are we are facing a huge amount of discussion about something that's not clear. So probably we are discussing more about how to put microservice, how to put blockchain, event-driven designing, and we have a huge amount of complexity to deliver what nobody wants. Furthermore, okay, if you are not delivering software that the client wants, what are you doing instead? So that is easy, right? We might be delivering some complexity, especially because right now we have a huge amount of choice facing the choice paradox. Trust me, I face that every single day because every night I enjoy to watch some serial movie on media. But right now, instead of have a single one, I have like five or six. So I need to navigate and search in Netflix, then Amazon Prime, then Disney Plus, then YouTube, then HBO. So sometimes I spend around 30, 40 minutes to choose a movie and fall asleep and fall in 5 minutes. So I usually spend more time choosing what I need to watch than watching that itself because I will fall asleep after 5 minutes. And that's happening with software development right now because developer experience become a market. So it's not bad, but we have a trade-off because right now we have a huge amount of choice. So we don't have just one language anymore. We don't have just one software architecture pattern anymore. We have a huge amount of those with a million of combinations, million of stacks, and so on. So it becomes complex to handle that. So we can see this old article, okay, not that old, less than 5 years, but 2021, explaining about the complexities killing software developers. So the majority of the problems is because we are following the hype. As you can see here, the hype become the biggest enemy that we are facing nowadays, make us kind of suffocate with this kind of complexity. Okay, Otavio, we are doing a super complex code. However, can I say that at least we are delivering what we need to do? Can I say that at least we are able to refactor the code easily? And unfortunately, again, we are doing a super complex code that is super hard to change, especially because we put a huge complexity because we might need to see that in the future. And usually, or however, this feature never happened. So you can see here the title first from Kent Beck, where he explained more about this point, especially because uh, it has become hard and harder to change. So it becomes a tough to change anything inside the software. And okay, if it is hard to change what I need to do, what happened with the quality of the software over the time? I guess everybody knows the answer, right? So unfortunately, it's become a huge impact inside my software. We are facing the software erosion. You can have more information on building evolutionary architecture. The second edition is even more fabulous, where you can have this definition of software erosion. So it is the software rot or co-rot or co-decay. That's basically that slow deterioration of software quality over the time. So doesn't matter if you're doing a good job or not. Eventually, the software will decrease if you don't pay attention on that, especially because business change over the time, requirement change over the time, the society, the humankind change all the time. Naturally, your software will follow the same trend. So you need to change your software over the time. However, your software is not ready to, and with the time, you're not able to even fight out against the software erosion. Okay, Otavio, we have a huge amount of discussion to deliver what we are not supposed to do. This way, we are have a huge amount of meetings that is a waste of time. So we are not delivering what we need to deliver. We are creating complexity instead. Our code is not ready to change, so it doesn't matter what I want to do in the future. My code will be impossible to change. The consequence naturally is become my premature legacy to finally not achieve the client goals, right? Especially because, okay, I spend a huge amount of time delivering what I need to should not deliver. We have a huge amount of meetings, the agile methodology, and so on. So the question that I have right now is one thing that I have been wondering for a long time. Are we doing properly the software engineering? Because I know there is a huge amount of definition of software engineer. My favorite one belongs to David Farley, the modern software engineering. That's basically mentioned that software engineering is the application of an empirical scientific approach to find efficient economical solution to practical problems in software. So the main goal of software engineering is to deliver something to achieve the client goals with the most economical and efficient solution as much as possible. And one way to solve that, yes, we had the agile methodology to make the engineering team close to the product. We also have one methodology that is domain driven design, where the goal is to deliver what I need to do. So basically, if I can summarize, is the design software to meet the business goal with less rework. And naturally, we have a huge amount of definition of domain-driven design. And I usually prefer to start with what is not domain-driven design, especially because probably you have heard a lot of domain-driven design definition. For me, that is the biggest mistake. People don't understand what domain-driven design really is. So if I don't understand as a first step, I will miss understanding the whole step and the whole process. So the first step is let's define what is not domain-driven design. Naturally, domain-driven design is not related to a framework inside the language. It's not related because you are using repository interface, repository annotation, or because you put a anti-annotation inside your classes. It's not because you are using Java. So okay, you can. It's a language agnostic that therefore you can use with Python, PHP, and so on. It's not because you are using microservice. So you can use microservice, monolith, clean architecture, whatever with domain-driven design. If you are focused only on code, you are doing domain-driven design the wrong way. And naturally, the goal is not to create complexity. So it is the opposite indeed. That is make your life easier and make sure that you're going using simplicity to achieve the goal that is make the client happier with your software or your software development. First, I love to explain what is not there. Let's go to what is domain-driven design. Domain-driven design. So the goal is to be driven by the domains. That is basically the knowledge of the business or the knowledge of the requirement. The goal is to do a transfer of knowledge between you, engineering team, to the product. So to have a better communication, to deliver what I need to deliver, and so on. And despite a lot of people believe Domain-driven design has two layers. One is the strategy. This way, you are able to understand, to create language, domain, subdomain, and then you are able to go to the code, exploring more the tactic of domain-driven design. So the the strategy is the one, the first one, and then you can go to the tactic domain-driven design. Let's start defining what is the strategic domain-driven design, especially because when we talk about domain-driven design, this one is the biggest mistake because people usually skip the step and go directly to the tactic. So domain-driven design, the strategic side is about defining domains and subdomains, then define the context mapping, the ubiquitous language, and finally the bounded context. So you will categorize your knowledge inside subcategories, so like sub areas inside the organization. Then define a terminology, a common terminology to communicate with your team and the product team. Then you define the context of those terminologies to finally the integration, and based on those four, you can be happy because you right now have the strategic domain-driven design. However, that is no super trivial to achieve and understand that. First step first. So let's explain what is the subdomain. So domains is about the knowledge, and subdomains are the types of knowledge that the organization has. On this case, by the book, we have three. So the core, that is unique, what makes your company unique, that has the competitive advantage inside the organization. This one here has a high business differentiation. And usually to follow, we also have a high business complexity as well. Then we have the generic subdomain, a common across all companies. So it is stored between activities. So there's less business differentiation. However, usually the complexity is pretty high. For example, security. But we usually go to use libraries and frameworks. So one way to avoid the complexity is identifying what the core inside the organization. If it's not your core, it should not have the highest priorities. So you can use a third library, party, and so on. And finally, the supporting the support and helps the core business activity if without providing competitivity advantage. So the business differentiation is median and the complexity may vary with this kind of thing. When we talk about subdomains, remember, we need to understand better this graph where I have my business logic, complexity, and my business differentiation. As I said before, put more energy inside the core because the core is where the business differentiation is. After identifying what it is core, supporting, and generic, the next step is define the terminology that we will communicate among the team and also among the product. So have a clear terminology makes your life easier. So, and that is the definition of the ubiquitous language because we have the same words, and this word can might have different meanings in different contexts. For example, bright can be something that has a huge light, or someone who is smart, and so on. The something happened with Ajax. So Ajax can be a clean product, a soccer team, and finally a technology that everybody hates. So the same words, different meanings, and we need to define a common language between the experts or product owner, stakeholder, and the engineering team. After that, naturally, we will communicate with another areas. For example, if I handle with e-commerce, Naturally, I know that my payment provider is not a core, it's a supporting. But naturally, if I go, I need to interact with different organizations, party, and so on. So in this case here, this picture belongs to Martin Fowler article. As you can see, they are sharing the same entities and definitions like customer and product, but those are based on different contexts. And that might happen to you as well. So pay attention. To simplify that, naturally, we have the context mapping to simplify the relationship between those contexts. So we're still discussing the strategic, and as you can see, those integration between components is super, super, super close to the architecture inside the organization. So we have the shared channel where you two areas we work together in a common knowledge or library. The customer supplier, so super clear one, right? So we have one that we produce and another one that we consume. So one will impact in directly in the order. We have the conformists that we are not able to change my supplier or my upstream. So imagine that I'm using Stripe or anything like that. So I'm not able to change and to use. I can combine this one here with anti-corruption layer. As the name say, the goal is to create a wrapper or abstraction to don't impact my domain with something that I don't want to. So, for example, uh, I don't want to impact my e-commerce with my payment library, so I can have encapsulation or using this anti-corruption layer. I have my open host service where I have my uh, API provided to be consumed to someone. Public published language where the goal is to have a common knowledge structure and so on. And the separate ways where two teams areas will work and they don't care about each other. Here I have a couple of samples. So share channel, as you can see, two contexts sharing the same knowledge. The customer supplier, so upstream, downstream. So I will provide functionality to the order, and the order will influence my requirements. The conformists are not able uh, to change and impact my upstream. Anti-corruption layer. So in this case, the conformist, it might be a good case to use the anti-corruption layer to protect my domain against this kind of technology. Published language. So I have people who will publish and consume. So a common language, API, and so on. Separate ways, so independent path, and open host service gateway. So everybody will, someone will expose API, and other people will consume those API. So those are basically the strategic domain-driven design, where I explain more about the terminology, that is the ubiquitous language, the context, the bounding context, the map context, and how to handle with those contexts based on patterns. I explained those seven. And there are several ways to extract this information from the domain expert. One way that I enjoy a lot is doing domain storytelling, where you have a visualization. You can also store that information as a code. So domain storytelling is super intuitive way to achieve that. And I enjoy that because there is a famous author, that is Harari, explained that the most ancient technology is the capability of the humankind tell stories. So domain storytelling use the most ancient techniques to achieve the goal of extract knowledge inside the software. So Here we have the Greeks mythology, and as you can see here, those gods and goddess were born even before the writing. And after that, so I got the idea of the strategic domain-driven design. I have those steps. I understood what the core subdomain and so on. Now, as a second step only, I can go to the tactics. So if I start with the tactic, I start doing domain-driven design wrong because we're gonna drive the code based on the domain, not the opposite. So we have those patterns codes. So I explain one by one. As you can see, we have 7 strategic, 7 tactic, and we have the entity that is an object identified by a unique identifier. For example, a customer that I have an ID, name and email, and um, my ID will define my customer identifier. Then I have my value objects. You can use as analogy and relate that with a types. So I have my email, money, and so on. Those are usually immutables. So you might use that a lot inside your projects. The aggregate, where I will have a cluster of empty and value objects, for example. My repository, that is an abstraction that provides access to aggregates and handle the persistence. So you can think repository as a collection of an entity or an aggregator. The factory, where the goal is to create an object. The domain service, where the goal is to encapsulate domain behavior. That it's sometimes more complex to say in the entity. So we can use the service. The event, when something happened. So I have my order and I publish my order confirmed event. This one here is not totally articulate related to domain-driven design, but we usually use that often. That is our application service, where the goal is to coordinate applications, workflows, and so on. So my goal here is to avoid that my domain will be impacted by something outside my application service. And remember, this one comes from a philosophy of code design explaining that if you focus on tactic, you're gonna do something wrong. And that is super valid point that you can think on domain-driven design. The majority of the idea is to always talk and discuss on the strategic domain-driven design. Otherwise, you will do something wrong. When we talk about domain-driven design, naturally, we need to face architectures and layers. Here, we have my presentation layer, application layer, the infrastructure layer, and my domain layer. As you can see, the domain layer is protected by application layer, and both application domain can use the infrastructure layer, as you can see here. But my presentation layer does not touch in my domain because it's protected by my application layer. And Otavio, but you are mentioning a lot of domain-driven design. So should I really talk about architecture when I discuss the design? The answer is yes. So it is come from the Hartford software architecture that brings the definition, for me, the most coolest and super clear definition of software architecture in design, where those are defined by spectrum. So when we work with architecture, you eventually will impact design. And when we work with design, we will eventually impact architecture. So But as the architecture, remember that domain-driven design goes to the strategic. So those are the two laws of architecture. Indeed, there are third one, but I enjoy more those two. The why is more important than how. And naturally, everything that we do in software architecture is about trade-offs. Domain-driven design perfect fits in several architecture styles, not only the DDD itself, but the book, but you can combine with microkernel, layer architecture, CQRS, orchestration architecture, microservice, monolith, layer architecture, and so on. Okay. Uh, After understood those ideas, you naturally can use tools to make your life easier, like ArcUnity, PMD, CheckStyle, and JMolecule. Naturally, my favorite one here of those are JMolecule, where you can use a couple of annotations, and based on that, you can create your unit test to verify your software architecture. As you can see here, I'll explain to you those annotations are using the actionable engine to achieve that. And why we have those? Basically, it's because based on just enough soft architecture, we have a lack of expression that fits on the language. For example, we talk about layers, but Java doesn't have the layer keywords, right? So we need to create some software architectural evidence about those. So there is this paper here explaining more about this idea. Unfortunately, I don't have time to show some code, so I will skip for today. So remember, software engineering is more the idea of achieve goals and explain more about what the client wants. I used to say that when you understand that the context is the king, you become, or at least you did the first step to become an ultimate of software engineer, especially because the simplicity is your biggest tool, especially because the principle of the ultimate sophistication engineer is about sophistication, and inspired by Leonardo da Vinci, the ultimate stage of sophistication is the simplicity. So, based on the context, you are able to define a software architecture with the reason, then go to the code design, where you're able to write code, naturally documented all decisions, all tactic, strategic inside your code, define quality and also documentation by tests, define where you're gonna persist those information, and finally, understand that this is the leadership that we need a lot. That is it for today. So my goal was to explain more about what is domain-driven design. It is a little bit about me. My name is Otavio Santana, software architecture and software engineer, Java champion, Oracle Ace, JSP executive member since Java 8, committer in several open source projects, and so on. So if you want to learn more about domain-driven design, naturally, and are able to go deep on those details, I recommend you to check this book, the newest book, so Domain-Driven Design with Java, where you can cover and understand at least the mindset of using domain-driven design. Naturally, those classic books is still required to read before or after this one. That is it for today. Hopefully you enjoy. So thank you. I don't know if there is any question.
Our webinar has come to an end. I'd like to extend a big thank you to everyone for participating, and a special thank you to the speaker for a captivating topic. It was a pleasure having you all here today. Have a great rest of your day.